is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
And good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink, and our guest is gender consultant Monica Prata.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi.
Before we get going, Patti, I just wanted to say you and I both went down to see the swearing in of the legislature because so many of our guests were being sworn in that day. It was wonderful to see. Now, you left on Saturday, right?
Yeah, I went down there on Saturday.
And I told you need to park by like 9 o'clock or you're not going to get parked. So what time did you get to the legislature?
I don't recall specifically, but I missed the swearing in.
Yeah, okay, so it was after...
Because there was no chance I was going to get in the gallery.
Yeah, so it was like, there was actually room. It was after 2 o'clock that I first saw Patti. The swearing in was at noon. I left Monday evening, and I beat Patti there. So for people who wonder why we call her the late Patti Fink, because we get that question every week.
Then you also know I wasn't on the show last Sunday,
right.
Of course the week before because I was in Austin, but I got sicker by the day when I was in Austin. So, near late. This is nothing new, Monica.
That's okay, Patti. You and I have lateness in common.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, Patti got here first today.
Yeah,
it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, she never beats our guests.
Well, there you go. You're welcome, Patti.
Oh, thank you.
I can see a long-term friendship has just started. Monica, you're a gender consultant. Tell us what that even is, because you kind of made up the career. You made up the industry.
I did, which is pretty cool to hear you say that. Thank you. So what it is to be a gender consultant is that I help people, specifically male to female, with all aspects of transition. So everything from self-identification to self-acceptance, getting over feelings of shame and discomfort coming out to family members, finding surgeons, endocrinologists, psychologists, deciding what surgeries to have, if any, and just all aspects of physical and emotional transition.
So how did you get into this with your psychology degree and your...
Yes, no, that would not be how I got into this. So I actually started as a makeup artist at MAC Cosmetics, and before that I was just a regular old stylist on the sales floor at Nordstrom in Oak Brook, Illinois.
And then MAC in New York?
That's where you are in now. Chicago as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you live in New York now.
I do.
We were talking about my old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
And I always do like to point out when I meet somebody who lives in New York that this time crazy comes from their state.
Yes.
And notice how they talk about New York just without mentioning, I guess the opposite of New York would be New York State. So you're just talking about New York City.
New York City.
Oh, okay. So I went to school in Albany, and we don't endorse on this station, but Kirsten Gillibrand did jump into the race this week. You know, we haven't had an Albany president since Martin Van Buren, and he's one of my favorites. So I'm thinking Kirsten is, we got to watch her. So you do all kinds of different things to help people in the trans community.
Yes, I do.
But how did you get into that? What made you decide, maybe I'm the one to do this?
So, I hate to get to start being sort of, philosophical, but I say that it's important to always accept the opportunities that the universe presents to you. And I've always sort of lived my life with this mindset of not saying no. And when I worked at MAC and when I worked at Nordstrom, I kept having trans people approach me, sometimes covertly, sometimes more publicly and, in a more comfortable way. But this kept happening to me. It just kept coming. And I felt, again, not to get weird about this, but I felt in a way that I was being called for something. And there was a community of people that just wasn't getting help in the way that they needed. And, you know, at the time, the resources that were available to trans women when it came to styling and, you know, different aspects of femininity, it was very like this tawdry, kind of like hypersexualized depiction of what femininity is. And I guess, you know, at the ripe old age of 17 years old, while I was working in Nordstrom, I saw this as an opportunity to kind of put my stamp on how I think femininity can be presented.
You know, and it wasn't just that, though. You were seeing how other people were helping these customers.
Yeah, and it mostly was that they were not helping these customers. So it was, you know, somebody would come in, and obviously this was at this point, you know, 12 years ago, so it was a while ago. But, you know, somebody would come in, they would be looking for lipstick, they would clearly be, you know, presenting as male, and the salesperson would be like, oh, you know, what can I help you with? And the person would be like, I'm just looking for lipstick. And it would be like, oh, is it for you? And when they would find out that it was, all of a sudden they would have to go on their lunch break, or they would, you know, have to do back stock. And you know,
instead of, gee, a customer came into my store, needs to buy something.
Totally, and just helping them and making them feel accepted and, you know, appreciated. And for me, you know, even when I worked for MAC, I still found it very intimidating because the girls are wearing all black and they're very put together. They have like a lot of eye makeup on, and you know, the MAC counter is kind of a scary place for anybody. And so to be so bold as to come and, you know, solicit help and also be presenting as male and to acknowledge, you know, your desired gender, I think is very cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure MAC, which has their own AIDS foundation.
Yes.
I'm sure MAC was horrified that some of their customers were coming in and not being helped properly.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's just, you know, it's about where specifically I was working. So at the time I was in Skokie, Illinois. That was the MAC counter that I was at. And so, you know, I wasn't in downtown Chicago, so I was in the suburbs. And I think that, you know, it doesn't matter what a company's policies are. So at the time, their corporate philosophy was all ages, all races, all genders. And I really embraced that, but just because I embraced that and the company itself embraced that, it didn't mean that every one of the staff members felt the same. So,
but you know what? You don't have to have a psychology degree to have a decent heart and a big heart.
Thank you, Pat.
Because I think, I think when you realize that everybody is a human being and should be treated with dignity and respect, just because they are a human being, not for any other reason, and you can tap into what it means to give dignity and respect to someone else. You don't need a bunch of degrees behind you to be successful.
Thank you.
You know, I think that's just remarkable that you were able to reach out just being you, without a lot of education behind you or you know, professional degrees.
And really what I learned, you know, through osmosis, I learned through field work. You know, if you calculated the number of hours I've just like been on the job, it's just been like, you know, thousands and thousands of hours at this point. But, you know, there's really no way to learn about this discipline of femininity without just like living it and experiencing it with the clients themselves and hearing what their struggles are, because it's very personal. And I think a lot of it, you know, a lot of what I take for granted in presenting my own femininity, I don't think I would have realized that those are questions that clients would have, you know. So it's been an interesting journey.
And it's commendable that you did reach out to some of these individuals, but at the same time, I got 17, 18 years old. I probably would have been a little scared because sometimes people don't, you know, how did you know they actually wanted help?
So, you know, I have a couple funny stories. So when I first started and when I was working in Nordstrom, you know, guys would come and I would always close, right? So I would be the later shift. And so it would be like right before closing at like 8:50, 8:55. And they'd stroll through and they'd, you know, get to my department. And they'd start looking at blouses or skirts, and I'd ask them if they need help, and they would tell me they're shopping for their girlfriend, Susanna, or whoever they are. And I would ask them to describe Susanna, and, you know, something in the description was always, like, just vague enough, where something in my head, like, this little alarm would go off.
She's exactly my size.
Yes, I would be like, interesting, quite remarkable that you found a woman that's the same size as you. So something just wouldn't ring true, and so I would try to really discreetly help those individuals. And, I would pick out clothes that I knew would kind of feminize their body shape and would fit them, while at the same time, like, grabbing a really boring pair of khakis from the men's department and putting them in the fitting room so that I could kind of allow them space and the opportunity to try on the women's clothes if they wanted to and if I was correct about that, or try on the khakis if I was incorrect, and then just decide on which of the dresses they want for their, similarly sized girlfriend Susanna.
Right.
So I don't know what it was about it, but it just kept happening. And before I knew it,
I know why it kept happening. Because you help one person has a friend who says, go and see Monica.
It must be. Go at 8:55. She'll be there. You won't even have to tell her anything. She'll just know.
Well, but it's not that part of it. It's all the other customers in the store.
Mm-hmm.
So
totally, and it was nice because Nordstrom is such a company that is sort of like accepting in that way, and they're very like hands-on, and they want you to like assist in any way possible. So it was great. I was able to like stay late with the customers that were shopping in that capacity, and it was a great feeling.
So going to the mall and getting your makeup done at a professional counter, I know it's like a big deal for a lot of girls and women.
Yeah.
Was there a time when a cisgender man came in and said, I want my makeup done?
I'm trying to, like, a cisgender person that was not wanting to present as trans.
Well, no, he was wanting to present in trans, but maybe this was his first, her first go at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, that definitely happened when I was working at MAC, for sure. People that were just kind of experimenting with their gender expression. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which I see a lot more of today, which is pretty magnificent.
Well, because the transgender community has grown so much,
yes.
It's not the one person going into the store. It's become a community, and more people are out as transgenders. So,
and it's an awful lot of, especially young people who are gender nonconforming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
just straight up, I'm who I'm going to be, and I want to experiment with these different things and different looks, and they may be gay males, they may be straight women, they may be lots of different things, and they just go and live who they want to be.
Now, this is about a lot more than just makeup, but let's just start with the makeup.
Sure.
A lot of trans people, especially a number of years ago, they got their good advice on how to do makeup from their drag queen friends.
Yes.
And
there's a huge difference between drag makeup and your average
a massive woman. Difference. Yes.
The way they do their
about
makeup.
6 layers of difference.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think that's sort of what I specialized in at the beginning, was really helping trans people find a very natural expression of femininity. And I would go out of my way to only shop with them for products that cisgender women were also buying, and shop in stores that cisgender women were also shopping in. So I sort of made this push to show trans people that they didn't have to be other. They didn't have to shop at special stores for special makeup, for special skin, or special stores for special clothes, because they're special people. They're special people, but not in that way. And so I think it's really important to just allow people to live within the realm of like normalcy, right? And not impose these restrictions and these ideals that like, oh, you're a man presenting as a woman, like now you must wear like 8 different colors of contour and highlight. And that's, because that's not realistic. That's not
right.
That's realistic if you were a drag performer and you're doing a show and you want to look incredibly glamorous
on stage with lights.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a place for that.
But like nobody's gonna do that level of makeup routine before they go to work every morning, and like right. God forbid you have to rub your eye. Like you're just gonna have blue eyeshadow all over your face.
If anything, I think even a cisgender woman, if she were to wear that much makeup on everyday life, that's going to draw so much more attention to you than probably that you want.
Yeah, you make a really good point. So one of the things that I'm constantly in conflict with my clients a little bit is that people really want to cover all of their stubble, like any beard. Not everybody can afford electrolysis. It's super expensive.
Right.
Not everybody's, facial hair responds to laser in the way that we hope it does.
And even just the stage you're in. I mean, if you're just beginning to do hormone therapy and such, there's a time, and maybe later you will get successful laser.
Exactly.
Right.
But there's the beginning stage where, like, especially if somebody comes to me, they're in those early stages of expression, and they just ran a razor over their face, like, in 3 hours, like, there is going to be a little bit of a shadow. And so I'm constantly having to explain to my clients that it's almost, you have to decide, like, do you want to look natural and confident in who you are and, like, just be comfortable being trans, or do you want to, like, really kick it on and sort of try to create this illusion, but something that's ultimately, like, if people do identify it, they almost identify it as an illusion. So I really try to encourage my clients to get to a point where they are proud identifying as trans women, instead of, we talked a little bit about this before the show, but, like, instead of reaching for, that loaded term passable.
Right. And I want to talk about passable.
Yeah,
we
let's
need to
talk
take
about
a
that.
break in just a minute, so I don't want to start that yet. But let's just talk about a couple of the other things that you do. Feminine comportment is one of those.
Yes.
Now, okay, so we're away from makeup. It's away from what you knew. It's away from dressing and how somebody should dress. What do you mean by feminine comportment?
So feminine comportment is anything from, the way we sit, the way we gesture, the way we walk, the way we get in or out of a car, the way we dance, the way we interact, the way we interact with ourselves physically. So it's...
Okay, so the woman that I spend the most time with is Patti, so I don't have a good role model for that. So what
That's the
type...
definition of femininity.
That's
here,
true.
right?
That's true. I always forget. So, what are some of the things that would be different?
What's interesting is, I know that obviously we're on air, so people can't see Patti right now. But what's interesting is that even though Patti's mannerisms aren't overwhelmingly feminine, they're still certainly more feminine than your mannerisms, right? So, like, Patti,
Everybody knows
most
how
of the
butch I am.
So what I'll say is, Patti she just gestured, and when she gestured within the parameters of her shoulders, and that's a very feminine thing, is to use, your own body shape kind of as a guide for where your gestures exist.
Let's keep talking about this, but we need to take a break.
Sure.
We're talking to Monica Prata. She is a gender consultant, which is a career she made up.
I love that.
A whole industry. A whole industry.
She made up the whole industry, and there seems to be a need for it. I'm Dave Taffet. I'm here with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink, and we'll be back with more Lambda Weekly right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink, and our guest is gender consultant Monica Prata. We were talking about comportment and what's the difference between the way a man carries himself and the way a woman carries herself. And you were saying, like, hand gestures are different.
So one of the, like, quickest, easiest tips that I can give to anybody that's interested in presenting in a more feminine or more masculine way is that women really gesture within the parameters of their shoulders. So that's, irrelevant, like, what size they are, right? You're a size 16 or you're a size 2, right? You're going to gesture within that space. And people that are identifying or presenting as men will gesture outside of that space generally. So it's an interesting thing where even if somebody's not, high femme, you'll still see it happen. So
That's really perceptive.
Where did you learn
how
some of
did you-
these? Where did you pick these things up?
Exactly.
I stared at people aggressively for many years.
People watching airports
Yes,
and
just everywhere.
malls.
People just being like, "Why are you staring at me?" And it's like, "I'm watching
I
your
love it.
gesture."
Yes. Who are
Picking-
completely offensive.
I'm doing my education. So do you think those qualities are innate, or is that something as a society we've learned how to communicate that way? Cisgender men, cisgender women.
That's such a great question. Obviously there are skeletal differences between
Absolutely.
men and women. So there are reasons why, men stand with their arms a little bit apart from, their upper chest, and women's elbows are kind of tucked in near their waist generally. But I think for the most part, gesture and comportment is almost like a colloquial language, right, of femininity, different forms of femininity, masculinity, different forms of masculinity. So you'll see variations of this in different parts of the country or different parts of the world too. Actually, just flew here from Miami. I was in South Beach for a week, and that's a city that really has such an exceptional presentation of gender, right? Because the masculine is like very masculine in that way, and the feminine is like very, very feminine, you know? So you get these sort of extremes, and then you go to other cities like, you know, San Francisco, where it's a little bit more blurred. So
yeah. And you know, I'm glad you brought up the skeletal differences. Going back to the makeup, especially for, you know, not all men and not all women have that dramatic difference, but most of them do.
Yeah.
Like men's brows tend to is more forward
Absolutely, the brow ridge.
than the women. So how big of a challenge was that to teach these trans women how to maneuver their makeup?
You know, so I got really lucky because after I had been doing this for about a year and I'd been working, you know, just rather intuitively on the makeup. I was hired by Dr. Osterhout, who is just a world famous, like recognizes the pioneer of facial feminization surgery in San Francisco. And so I moved from Chicago to San Francisco to work for this magnificent surgeon. And he really taught me about the skeletal differences, right? So you're talking about the, you know, the brow ridge, the frontal bossing is what that's called. And really helped me put science and math like to what I was doing naturally. So he would explain to me, you know, women's eyes tend to be a little bit wider set. The space between the base of the nose and the top of the lip tends to be shorter. You know, the jaw curves under, right? And it doesn't flare out on the edges. So there are all these really clear differences in structure, and I was already sort of adjusting those things just by sight with makeup. But once I worked for him, I was able to take that to the next level and really know, you know, that the upper lip should be shortened by 2 millimeters, or I should, you know, with cosmetics, really go out of my way to make the eyes appear wider, you know, or the temples to appear fuller. So there are all these subtle differences.
That's great, because like you said, not all people can afford or want to even go get surgery.
Or can medically.
Or can, feminize their face, yeah.
That's remarkable. That must have been such an experience to try new things and make that happen and see the results of your work.
It was incredible, you know, and I'm trying to make a big push for, you know, insurance companies and different medical practices to start incorporating you know, some styling elements for trans people. I think right now, you know, the medical community has a very binary idea of what it means to be trans and what it means not to be trans. And, you know, just as you said, not everybody can medically have these surgeries. You know, in order to have facial feminization surgery, you're under anesthesia, you know, sometimes for 8 hours and sometimes for two, you know, one first surgery and one second surgery for 6 hours at a time. And that's just an incredible amount of time to be under. And I really feel strongly that there should be alternatives, and people shouldn't feel like in order to present as women and in order to be accepted that they need to have, you know, certain facial features and go under the knife, or that they need to have a vagina. And like I'm really like trying to make a big push to get away from that.
I remember, a couple of years before Caitlyn Jenner came out as trans, when he was still Bruce Jenner. Bruce had went under surgery to have his Adam's apple shaved down. And that was one of the things that was indicative that he was going to transition.
Yeah, such a clear indicator.
Yeah. And some men, not all, but some men do have a pretty prominent Adam's apple.
Yes.
Women do not have one at all.
Some women have little ones. Have you ever looked at Ann Coulter?
Yeah.
She has a pretty massive Adam's apple.
Really?
Yeah. You should Google image.
Okay. So how did you? I guess I had.
Well, let's put a caveat here, unless you don't feel like throwing up. Okay.
Just don't read her tweets or books. Yeah.
So how do you? Is there makeup to compensate for that?
No, that's just pure acceptance. You know,
Gotcha.
so I think a lot of trans women will want to wear turtlenecks or scarves or and that makes me sad. Like, I don't feel like anybody should have to hide their male attributes to also express femininity. I really don't see these things as an either or. Expressing femininity is a choice. If you have, an Adam's apple, you have an Adam's apple. If you have a, frontal bossing, you have frontal bossing. And, people can choose their ideal measure of femininity, but I don't know. I don't think that covering your Adam's apple should be a prerequisite to presenting.
I agree.
Okay, so another body difference between men and women would be the hips.
Yes.
Does that affect how people walk? Because there's a different walk between men and women.
Totally. Sometimes I feel like the things that I'm teaching people to do, I'm like, oh, your back's going to hurt later. I'm like, this can't be good for you.
Right.
But I'll always try to teach people, this is how you can do it, and then you can take it down from there. So some trans people that are going full time, they sort of, they want to have this experience that they've never had before. They want to be let into this world that they've always been excluded from. And it's one of those things where, like, once you learn how to do it, you can sort of, like, break the rules and make them your own. And I think wardrobe and, makeup and comportment is very much like that. So one key difference between how women walk and how men walk is that men will lead with their pelvis and women will not. So, like, if I walk across the room, you'll notice that, like, my hip and my shoulder are in line with one another as I move. But if you walk across the room, then you'll see that, like, you're going to be jutting forward at the lower body a little bit. Think like John Wayne.
And not like I want to pick on her, but what about when Patti walks across the room?
I'd have to watch Patti walk, but she has a very feminine body shape, so my guess is that it's going to be similar to mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
We're still
I don't know how about anybody could ever not know that Patti was a female.
Yes, exactly.
We still
But
have
you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
But Lerone, we have our Christmas gift for her. It is a gift certificate to MAC Cosmetics.
Well, there you go.
It'll surely get used because she does need a little bit of clear lip gloss.
Lifetime supply.
A lifetime supply. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about passing.
Mm-hmm.
And is she passable? And I've always felt uncomfortable with that term because it's kind of like when the LGBT community is told, oh, well, I tolerate you.
Yeah.
Especially churches.
Ugly sounding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't want to be tolerated. Good, you put up with me. Thanks, but I'll live
you don't
without
spit
that.
on me.
So-
Yeah.
I think passing is a little bit different from that, only because passing is a choice made by the individual, right? Like someone that's trans may choose to want to pass. Like, I have a lot of clients that reach out to me, and the first sentence of their email is like, I've had all these surgeries and I'm not passing! Exclamation point, exclamation point. So it's, it becomes about safety and it becomes about acceptance because, I'm in New York City, but not all of my clients are in New York City. So depending on where they are in the country and where they are in the world, the difference between passing or not passing could be the difference between, like, getting beat up and not getting beat up.
And I get that.
Right.
I'm just talking about feeling like you have to pass.
No, it's a horrible
or feeling
feeling.
tolerated.
Isn't it really, when you get down to it, is passing or not, it's not, I guess I should need to ask a trans woman this. Isn't it more about you just don't want to be detected? And I don't mean it's like unwanted attention.
Yeah, exactly. Like, not everybody wants to walk into a room and immediately be identified for what their gender is today and what it was yesterday.
Exactly.
Some people, I have this amazing client. She ran for, She ran for town supervisor in Newcastle, in New York, and as a trans woman, and she is a parent. She's the parent of 2 sons, and she is a great friend, and she has her own law firm. She's an amazing attorney, and now she's a politician. And she has always said to me, she's like, look, I want people to see me as those things first, and then I want people to see me as trans, because I'm proud of being trans, but I don't need to lead with that. That doesn't need to be, I don't need to be like transgender lawyer, parent, politician. It's like, lawyer, parent, politician, oh my gosh, and she happens to be trans. Can you believe she's accomplished that much?
That's like one time Patty's partner, her wife now, was on the news, and she was identified on the chyron underneath her name Aaron Moore, lesbian.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Yeah.
Isn't that bizarre?
I'm like,
We
why
laugh
does that
about
matter?
it.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it was a lesbian issue that she was talking about, but
Still.
Right.
It's kind of famous in our community here
I
because
love that.
we reposted on Facebook, and they were interviewing her about an event, an LGBT event.
Sure.
Granted, but it's Aaron Moore, lesbian.
organizer, or
Yeah.
event organizer.
But it kind of goes back to working at the Mac counter. If a woman walks in, another woman just wants her makeup done, let's get to it, as opposed to, this was a trans woman and now everybody's going to stare.
Yeah.
So I get that part of it. You may not want to call it passive, but you just want to be treated and viewed just like anybody else.
Yeah.
Leslie has a great story. We have a trans couple, and they're both transgender women, Leslie and Katie, who come on our show very regularly.
They're married now. They're married now.
They are married.
Congratulations.
But Leslie was in a ladies' room, and this was during the height of the bathroom bill talks last session, so it had to have been 2 years ago.
What fun.
And it was, yeah. And she's in a bathroom, and, she goes in, does her thing, and several women are talking about, can you imagine if there were men in our bathroom? And so Leslie just said, yeah, I just can't imagine it. Checks her hair, dries her hands, and walks out. But I guess she passed.
Yes, she definitely passed.
But, and I get that for safety.
Yeah. But it's not always for safety. Sometimes it's what the person wants, right? Like, not everybody wants to be a pioneer for trans rights. Not everybody wants to, have questions asked to them. Some people just want to be. And that's the way a lot of my clients present it to me. I'm like, what are your objectives? And they'll tell me their objectives, and then I'll ask them, well, why are those your objectives? And sometimes they'll say, because I think I'll lose my job if it's not that way, or I think people won't like me, or I think I'll never find, a romantic partner. So the reasons are all different, but I think ultimately it's just that people want to just be themselves. And for a trans person, most of them have lived the majority of their lives feeling unaccepted and feeling like they're walking around, in a male disguise. And, they just want...
It strikes me sometimes as many trans women wear very high heels and dress to the nines. And as a lesbian, as a dyke, I mean, I like flat shoes. I like to be comfortable, and so wearing heels, I think, that's so painful. And unless you do it all the time, it really, it changes your gait, it changes everything.
Really helps with that feminine walk.
Right. But I love sometimes seeing or like meeting someone for just for coffee or something, a trans woman in there like in jeans and flat shoes and a t-shirt and just hanging.
Totally.
And they don't in that moment feel like they need to do all of that. Dress up,
and
dressing up for other people.
And I think that
themselves.
Passing doesn't necessarily mean presenting like a high femme presentation. You know what I mean? Like, passing can be wearing jeans that are cut well for your body and feminize your shape, and a t-shirt that's well cut for your body and feminizes your shape, and flats that perhaps minimize the size of your foot if you have a foot that's a really longer size, and there are
height,
things
also height. If you were tall, you don't want to accentuate by adding 2 inches.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
Right.
Or 4.
Yeah, sometimes the heels get really high, but I think that's all about helping somebody find their idea of what femininity means to them, and that's so personal, right? I still view you, Patti, as feminine. You identify as a butch lesbian, but you're still feminine to me in your presentation. I obviously also define myself as female and as feminine, and you and I have very different ideas of what that looks like. But I think that trans women are just, for sure. But I think
What?
I said very.
I've got long hair, Patty's got short hair. Okay, we're both wearing earrings though.
Right. And I kind of feel like this old term, kiki, for lesbians who feel like they're kind of in the middle.
And see,
butch.
I find it interesting, and you probably do too, Lerone, that Patti even knew that there were 4-inch high heels.
Well, I see them on other people, and I just go, "Oh my God, that's so painful." It's painful
She
to
knows
see.
they exist.
Yes,
Have you ever worn them?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
She's worn them. See?
And-
Well, we need pictures.
Wow. We do.
But I think that for trans women, especially for new trans women, it's about learning what their ideal feminine presentation is. And I think it's really important that as a society, we don't try to impose any ideas of what we view as feminine. And I love that you love when you see a trans woman in just jeans, flats, and a t-shirt. And I think that's a great natural presentation of their femininity.
We need to take a break, but on your website you have one person, and on the website it shows the before and the after.
Mm-hmm.
So as a man, she was masculine in a business suit.
Okay.
And as a woman, she still had the same job, so she's feminine in a business suit.
Yeah.
So it's, completely different than Patti, who used to work from home, and her business suit was her pajamas.
Sure, absolutely.
But prior to that, I did wear a business suit every day and had a briefcase and heels, and and
That's when she wore the
Which
heels.
we don't
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Well, they were 2 inches, and go Ferragamo if you have to stand on your feet all day.
Oh,
Spend the money.
Lerone, we've never had this conversation with and
Never
we've been
had this
doing show
conversation.
I'm bringing up Patty's
And I've
femininity.
never seen it.
I mean, the three of us every Sunday for 2 decades.
Wow.
And she's talking about Ferragamo shoes. Who knew she even knew how to
I
pronounce the
know,
word?
exactly.
You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the very feminine, yet late, Patti Fink. Our guest is Monica Prata. She's a gender consultant, and we'll be back with more after this.
This is Rollins Gilliland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it.
And this is Lambda Weekly, and I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink. And with us today is Monica Prata, and we're talking about her business. She's a gender consultant and the different things she does for transgender women.
Oh, but you go, Patti.
Oh, I was just talking in the break about how, I've done a lot of classes over the years, LGBT cultural competency classes at the Dallas Police Academy and Dallas Fire Rescue for decades now. And when we get to that place in the class where we ask the question of the class, and usually there's anywhere from 40 to 75 people in the class, men and women, all races and religions and all the things. And what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? And the answers are all over the map. And as we sort of knock them out, I was mentioning, some of them say, oh, well, you have to be facial hair to be male. Well, what about the clean-shaven guys in the room? Are they not masculine because they don't have a beard? Well, no. And they start to try to hone what it means. And they just don't get there. And oftentimes the closest we get is in the sensibilities, in the way men and women think. And so it really doesn't even have anything to do with appearance.
Right.
Right.
About, what you see. It's only how a person thinks. Well, no, but maybe. And so, so maybe it's all in the brain. And I'm thinking, well, there we go.
That's perfect.
Here we are in gender. Gender's in the brain.
They're lucky to have you teaching those classes.
But it's really amazing to me that it happens almost the same way, class after class after class.
Yeah. Before the break, we were talking about the issue of passing, and I just thought about, that's a historically commonly used term with African Americans. Back in the day, when you had an African American who was light skinned or probably was more likely biracial, and they could pass for being white. And that was a proud moment for them because they were allowed to enter sacred spaces they would not be allowed to enter into had anybody known that they were actual black or half black. So I wonder, is it kind of the same goal with some individual trans women to enter sacred spaces of cisgender women? And I'm not talking about a restroom, but hanging out with the girls, going to certain parties, just being totally embraced with cisgender women.
And not having to express your gender difference unless you choose to express your gender difference.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think once you enter those spaces, you you may feel safe enough and comfortable enough to expose yourself in that way. But I think it's, the difference of passing or not passing is, is that exposure a choice or is it imposed upon you?
Right.
It's interesting because last night I watched stuff on the DVR, and I had a bunch of Finding Your Roots with Henry Gates.
Henry Louis Gates?
Yeah. Louis Gates. And I watched the one with Janet Mock.
Yes.
And
just talking about it.
they showed a clip of her at the Women's March, at the first one, and she said, I made my path to this stage to be eligible to be in this space at the Women's March.
Yes.
And it was so powerful to me. I rewound it and watched it again, because it is a space. That is sort of a space, the Women's March. So powerful, and yet so many trans women are there. I mean, and have been there.
Yeah,
and they may
I've
not
been
even
there
realize it.
For so long too, and have been advocating for for women in general. Maybe even quietly. I think that some of the coolest clients that I have are people that are are CEOs of very large companies, and they're not out yet. And they go out of their way to hire women. They hire lots and lots of women, and they really make it a priority, and they really are representing, the female community already preemptively, and they're already on our side, and I think that's really cool.
I think that's exciting.
I mean, if they're trans and they're a trans woman, how they present,
exactly.
They still consider themselves to be a woman, so it makes sense.
Exactly, but they're not out to anybody yet, which I think is pretty fun.
That is interesting. Speaking about being out, one of the things that you'll do is help one of your clients write a letter to their parents or other family.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Or visit them. With them.
Yeah, or kind of facilitate the interaction. Sometimes we'll do it within the Novoshi studio and, have it happen there. Or one of my favorite things to do is to, if a wife already knows about her husband's gender difference, but she's maybe never seen it, is I'll facilitate an interaction. So I'll, get the client ready and they'll look really beautiful, and we'll do some prep work, days before, and pick an outfit and the hair and do it all. And then, we'll go out to a restaurant together, and it'll be me and the client, and then the wife will come and meet us there. And that's so cool because I get to be there while she's seeing, her husband as this beautiful woman for the first time. And actually I want to say, and not always beautiful, but just as a woman for the first time, because I think it's important to comment on the fact that not all trans women want to be beautiful women. Trans women just want to be women. So the beauty comes later, and that's that's extra, and that's something that some people desire and some people don't care about. But it's a really powerful moment of acceptance and love, and it's so cool.
That's fantastic.
In a letter, what is it that you tell the family?
Well, so that really depends on the family, right? And what they're...
each one's going to be a different circumstance.
So completely, yeah.
But, a family that maybe you're expecting will be accepting, but this is new.
I think it's important to tell your family that that this is difficult for them, and that you acknowledge that, and that you are asking for their love and support, and that their acceptance is important to you, because not every family member realizes how valuable they are to the person that's coming out to them. So I think that's really, really important. And I think just to present themselves honestly and tell them who they are and where they are, and that they're not going to change as people. I think family members are always really worried, oh my gosh, does this mean that you're going to be a different person? Are you going to like different things? Are we going to go to different places? And it's no, this person loved baseball. They still love baseball. This person, likes eating Japanese food. They're still going to like Japanese food. It doesn't change the person's
And one
identity.
of the things that's kind of interesting is I know more trans people who are airplane mechanics than I think any one particular industry. Well, we have a bunch of airlines that are based here.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so they work for Southwest or American, and or a private aircraft company, and there's several of those in the air, but it's not what the stereotype is of who a woman should be.
Yeah.
And so it's isn't that interesting? But the woman is still going to be an airplane mechanic.
Exactly. It's just a woman that's an airplane mechanic now, and not a man.
And there are lots of women who are
yeah.
airplane mechanics.
And the funny thing is that, you know, the trans person, even though they're, you know, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but even though they weren't presenting as women, you know, 4 weeks ago, perhaps, like, they were still women, like, psychologically, like, they were still identifying as women. So the difference that the family members and the coworkers are seeing is really just, you know, a physical presentation difference. And also, you know, they're probably a lot lighter and a lot happier and a lot more, like, honest and open and willing to connect. So, like, that difference is also certainly a tangible one. But,
you know, one thing that is nice is I'm seeing, and I think this is more of a trend, as there are more and more out transgender people, more and more families are being accepting, including the spouse.
yeah.
And like Jess Herbst, when she's been on, Jess was the former mayor of New Hope, which is a small city in the next county up from here.
Okay.
And her wife was on, and I asked her about how she's doing with being the wife of a woman now, because she's a heterosexual woman herself. And she said, well, I had a choice. It took about 1.5 years to come to terms, but I realized Jess is my soulmate. So
That's really sweet.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But Jess didn't change. She was
Jess is still
always
Jess,
Jess. Jess
yeah.
is still Jess. She's the same person she's always been. She's the same character she's always been.
Yeah.
And but I'm finding that more and more that people are.
And I think that's really
Being accepted.
a statement too about just the general idea of coming out, coming out as yourself in whatever form that is that it took a long time for me to like when I came out, and we talk about the first time we came out, or the first time we came out to our parents or someone like that. It took me a long time to get to this place where I'm doing this. We need to have the patience and the understanding and the welcoming struggle it will take for family members to arrive at that place too, because it didn't happen for me overnight. It's not going to happen for them. You know, we need to give them that space to
Absolutely.
come into that same place with you.
I'm so glad you said that, because, you know, sometimes my clients will get really frustrated if their mother or father is still using, you know, their dead name, right? So, like, they're, you know, someone's Brian and then they transition to Brianna, for example, and, you know, mom and dad are still calling them Brian, but it's like I'm constantly having to remind them, like, your parents knew you as Brian for 40 years. So even though you always knew that that wasn't your identity, like, that's not how you identified, for them it's new, and they're still making that change. They're still, you know, absorbing all this. Like, you have to allow them you know, time to accept you. And I think that's really hard for people to do, because, you know, they've waited their whole life for this. And so sometimes a trans person will transition and they'll just be like, well, why don't you get it? And it's like, well,
It takes time.
it takes a lot of time.
Reminds me of another person we've had on the show. When Jackie was on the show, Jackie Angst, who lives out in California now, she said her 85-year-old mother continued calling her Jason. And she said, my mother and I get along great. She sees the same person I've always been. And she didn't mean that in a bad way. She wasn't seeing a man, but this is my kid.
Yeah.
And, you know, for 85 years, or not 85 years, but Jackie's whole life, that's what she called her. And you know what? She's 85. We get along great. If that's the worst thing that ever happened to me,
Exactly.
that I get along with my mother, you know.
And I love Leslie McMurray's story about, she said she approached her old elderly mother and said, when she was transitioning, what were you going to name me if I were a girl? And she said, Leslie. And so that's the name she took.
I love that.
So she feels like her mother named her.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
That is a beautiful story.
I often ask, so in recent years I've had younger and younger clients, and a lot of the time I'll have mom and dad actually hire me, which is really cool. They'll be like my...
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, it's
That
so
is awesome.
I've had grandmothers reach out to me for gift certificates for their grandchildren that are transitioning.
That's
Oh,
incredible. That's so
wonderful.
awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing. This is all very new. This is really just like the last year that I've been getting, you know, grandma and grandpa, and you know, a couple years back, mom and dad started rolling in. So when I have a young trans person, I'll usually ask that the mother and father provide like a short list of names. And so I'll be like, can you maybe choose like, 5 or 10 names? They can be family names or just names that you like and something that you think, would fit well, would, suit your kid well. And then me and the individual will narrow it down. And that's, I think, really a fun way to do it.
That's so incredible. Because there may be some great family name that you want to honor your great grandparents, or there's been a long line of Monica's.
Not in my family.
But no,
I'm the only Monica.
But that's an interesting point about the naming. As you said, David, not only has a parent known you for 40, 50 years, they actually pick that name themselves. So they have a connection. They have a connection to it, and it's not going to be overnight that they can just drop it. I mean, it was a long time before we decided on a name for our kid, and so if she transitioned, it would be hard to just overnight.
Yeah, for a year and a half, they called Gabrielle Girl Number One.
Well, Gabrielle's a beautiful name, so I think the year and a half was worth it.
Thank you.
We're almost out of time, but you also help people with voice.
I do a little bit, but not so much. So voice is really like the lesser aspect of my work. I work with some incredible voice coaches. So Christine Block, who's in the financial district of Manhattan, she's absolutely spectacular for in-person work. Kathy Perez, who's based out of Colorado, she has a great app called Eva M to F. It's available on like the iTunes store, I guess, or I don't know, the App Store. What is that even called?
I don't know what these kids call those things.
Okay, right. I'm really supposed to know. And so, don't tell anybody I don't. The Eva M to F app is incredible. People can download it. They can, work on their voice in their car. They can work with Kathy remotely. So these are two people that are just really special and have provided this amazing service to the trans community. But, small tips and things that trans women can do is, I would say, just working on kind of softening their voice, so sort of rounding everything out a little bit, and of course just speaking a little bit more quietly. Men tend to speak much louder than women, so those are just some subtle things.
Boy, do they.
Right? So loud. But
said Patti.
They gesture big, and
big gestures, big voices,
big loud mouths.
But what I really, really adore is when a trans person is just totally comfortable and cool, just like, presenting however they want to present, using their voice as wherever it is. And I think the thing that I would leave anybody who's transgender who's listening to this would just be to be proud of who they are and to honor their journey, and wherever that is.
Monica, I want to thank you for being here.
Thank
it was a fun hour.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come back.
A lot of fun. I would love to.
Your website is?
It's monicaprata.com.
And
Prata is Prata. Yeah.
And thank you for being with us. Who's our guest next week? I know. We have a good guest
Me
next week.
Kidding.
Dude, come back.
So, for all of us here at Lambda Weekly, be best.
Be best.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.